Velum Files. The Dyatlov Pass Mystery. Intro. In February of 1959, 9 experienced hikers disappeared in the remote Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. Weeks later, their bodies were discovered scattered across the snow. Some were barefoot. Some were missing clothing. One victim was missing her tongue. Another had severe internal injuries, but almost no visible wounds. Their tent had been cut open from the inside, and the group had fled into the freezing darkness. Temperatures that night dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. No one should have survived outside for long, yet the footprints investigators discovered told a strange story. The hikers had not been running. They had been walking, calmly, step by step, into the forest. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident, one of the most mysterious and disturbing unsolved cases in modern history. Part 1. The Expedition. The expedition began as a winter hiking trip organized by university students. Most of the group studied at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. They were young, ambitious, and highly experienced in winter expeditions. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov. He was only 23 years old, but despite his age, he was already known as a disciplined and reliable expedition leader. Friends described him as calm under pressure, careful with planning, and deeply passionate about exploration. The expedition included 8 other members. Each had significant experience with long winter treks. Several had completed extremely difficult mountain routes. Among them were engineering students, athletes, and skilled outdoor enthusiasts. Zinaida Kolmogorova was known for her determination. Rustem Slobodin was physically strong and respected by the group. Lyudmila Dubinina had already proven herself on several difficult expeditions. Even after injuries during previous trips, she always continued forward. The group trusted each other. They had trained together. They had endured difficult conditions before. Their destination was deep in the northern Ural Mountains, a remote wilderness known for brutal winters and unpredictable weather. Their planned journey was classified as a Category 3 expedition. At the time, this was the most difficult classification recognized in Soviet hiking. The hikers spent weeks preparing. They gathered equipment, skis, warm clothing, food, cameras, journals, everything needed to survive weeks in the wilderness. Originally, there were 10 members, but early in the journey, one student became ill. He decided to return home. That simple decision ultimately saved his life. The remaining 9 hikers continued deeper into the mountains. None of them knew that history would remember their expedition forever. Part 2. The Journey North. The group first traveled by train across the Soviet Union. Then they took trucks toward the northern wilderness. Eventually, they reached the last inhabited settlement near the mountains. From there, their journey continued on skis. The terrain quickly became more challenging. Forests grew dense. Snow covered everything. The temperatures dropped further each day. Yet despite the harsh environment, the hikers remained optimistic. Their cameras captured moments of laughter. Their journals described jokes and stories shared around campfires. They sang songs. They teased one another. They were confident. They were prepared. And they believed they could handle anything the mountains might bring. But the Ural Mountains are unpredictable. Storms can appear within minutes. Winds can reach dangerous speeds. And temperatures can drop low enough to kill within hours. Still, nothing in their writings suggested fear. Nothing suggested danger. Until the night of February 1st. Part 3. Kholat Shakhl. On February 1st, the hikers reached a mountain known as Kholat Shakhl. The name comes from the language of the local Mansi people. It translates to something unsettling: Mountain of the Dead. Legends about the mountain had existed for generations, but the hikers were not concerned with folklore. They were explorers, scientists, athletes. They believed skill and preparation could overcome nature. Instead of descending into the nearby forest for shelter, they set up camp on the exposed slope of the mountain. The forest would have provided protection from the wind. But, for reasons still debated, the group chose the open mountainside. Some researchers believe poor weather caused them to misjudge their location. Others believe they intentionally camped there to practice surviving harsh conditions. That evening, the wind began to intensify. Snow blew across the mountainside. Visibility dropped inside the tent. The hikers prepared dinner. They talked. They wrote in their journals, and eventually prepared to sleep. None of them realized it would be their final night alive. Part 4. Something in the night. Sometime during the night, something happened. Investigators would later discover that the tent had been cut open. From the inside, the hikers had sliced through the fabric to escape. They did not use the entrance. That detail alone suggests urgency. Something frightened them enough to flee immediately. Even more disturbing, most of the hikers left the tent without proper clothing. Some wore only socks. Some had no shoes at all. And outside, the temperature had dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Whatever had happened forced 9 experienced hikers to abandon their shelter instantly. Outside the tent, investigators later discovered footprints. The tracks moved down the slope toward the forest, but the footprints were strange. They were not chaotic. They were not the tracks of people running for their lives. They appeared calm, slow, almost controlled. Part 5. The search begins. When the hikers failed to return on schedule, friends and family grew concerned. Search teams were organized, students volunteered. Soon, military personnel joined the operation. Helicopters searched the mountains from above. Rescuers moved slowly through deep snow. The terrain was dangerous. Storms repeatedly interrupted the search. Days passed with no results. Then, searchers finally discovered the abandoned tent. It was partially buried beneath snow. The cuts in the fabric were clearly visible. Inside the tent, everything the hikers needed to survive was still there. Boots, warm jackets, food, equipment, all left behind. Made no sense. Why would experienced hikers abandon their shelter without their gear? Something must have forced them out. Something powerful enough to override their survival instincts. Part 6. The first bodies. Following the footprints down the slope, searchers reached the edge of the forest. There, they discovered the first 2 bodies. The men were lying beneath a large cedar tree. Both were barefoot. Both wore only minimal clothing. Their hands were badly damaged. Broken branches high in the tree suggested something unusual. Investigators believe the men had climbed the tree, possibly to look back toward the campsite, or perhaps to escape something below. Nearby, searchers found the remains of a small fire. The hikers had tried to stay warm, but the freezing cold was too severe. Both men died from hypothermia. Part 7. More discoveries. Over the next several weeks, search teams continued to comb the mountainside. 3 more bodies were discovered between the forest and the tent. These hikers appeared to have attempted to return to the campsite. Perhaps they hoped to retrieve clothing and equipment. But they never made it. The cold overtook them first. Their bodies froze where they fell. At this point, 5 of the 9 hikers had been found, but 4 were still missing. Part 8. The ravine. 2 months later, as the snow began to melt, searchers discovered the remaining 4 bodies. They were buried deep in a ravine. These victims had suffered the most severe injuries. One had massive chest trauma. Another had a fractured skull. Yet, Strangely, there were almost no external wounds. The injuries resembled those caused by enormous pressure. Like the victims had been crushed, one victim, Lyudmila Dubinina, was missing her tongue. Parts of her face were also missing. Investigators initially suspected animals. But the unusual injuries raised even more questions. What kind of force could have caused such trauma? Part 9. The investigation. The Soviet investigation struggled to explain the tragedy. There were no signs of a struggle with another group, no evidence of animal attacks, no footprints other than those belonging to the hikers. Eventually, authorities closed the case. Their official explanation was vague. The hikers had died due to an unknown compelling force. No further details were provided. Several documents related to the case disappeared, and the area around the mountain was closed to visitors for years. The lack of answers only deepened the mystery. Part 10. Theories. Over the decades, many theories have emerged. Some believe the hikers were caught in a sudden avalanche. Others suspect secret military experiments. There were reports of strange glowing lights in the sky around the time of the incident. Some researchers believe the hikers may have witnessed experimental weapons testing. Another theory involves infrasound, a rare atmospheric phenomenon caused by wind moving across certain mountain shapes. Infrasound can create intense feelings of anxiety and panic. If the hikers experienced this phenomenon, it might explain why they suddenly left the tent. But none of these theories explain every detail. Why were the footprints calm? Why did some victims suffer severe internal injuries? And why were parts of the investigation hidden for decades? Part 11. Modern investigation. Decades after the tragedy, the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass incident refused to disappear. Researchers, journalists, and independent investigators continued to study the case. For many years, access to official documents was limited. Some records had disappeared, others remained classified. But interest in the case continued to grow. Books were written, documentaries were filmed, and investigators from around the world began searching for answers. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation. Scientists studied weather records from 1959. They analyzed satellite data and mountain terrain. Computer simulations were used to recreate possible avalanche conditions. One theory suggested that a small slab avalanche may have formed above the campsite. The shifting snow could have placed pressure on the tent. The hikers may have feared that a larger avalanche was coming. If that happened, cutting their way out of the tent would have been the fastest escape. But critics quickly pointed out problems with this theory. The slope where the tent was located was not very steep, and the tent itself did not appear heavily buried in snow. The footprints leading away from the campsite remained visible for weeks. In most avalanche situations, such tracks would disappear quickly. Because of these contradictions, many researchers remain skeptical. Part 12. A mystery that endures. More than 60 years have passed since the events on Kholat Syakhl. Yet the Dyatlov Pass incident continues to fascinate investigators around the world. Many questions remain unanswered. What caused the hikers to leave their tent so suddenly? Why did they walk calmly into the freezing darkness? What created the severe injuries found on some of the victims? And why were parts of the investigation hidden for so long? Some believe the explanation may be simple: a combination of natural forces, panic, and the brutal conditions of the mountain. Others believe something more unusual occurred, something investigators never fully revealed. But until new evidence appears, the truth may remain hidden in the snow-covered mountains of the Ural wilderness. Outro. More than 60 years later, the Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the most haunting mysteries in modern history. 9 experienced hikers, a torn tent, strange injuries, and footprints leading into the frozen darkness. Something happened on that mountain. Something powerful enough to drive 9 skilled explorers out into a deadly storm. But exactly what happened that night may never be fully known. Perhaps the truth lies buried beneath the snow, or perhaps the Dyatlov Pass mystery will remain unsolved forever. This has been Velum Files.